Find the prime factorization of 210. Show the numbers on the place value chart using digits. Use less than, greater than, and equal to compare. Explain your thinking. Try these problems and check your work on the next slide. Plot these numbers on the number line. How many different ways can you write 2,600? Today we're going to learn how to multiply by two-digit numbers using the standard algorithm that we learned in 5th grade. There are 4 steps to multiplying a two-digit by a two-digit number. The first thing I want to do before I do anything else is to make an estimate so that I have an idea about what my answer should be. So, 38 is close to 40 and 24 is close to 20. So I say my basic fact, 4 times 2 is 8. There are 2 zeros. So my estimate is going to be 800. Now I'm ready to multiply. Step 1 tells me multiply the top number, which is 38, by the digit in the ones place in the bottom number, which is this 4 right here. So I'm going to multiply 38 times 4. 4 times 8 is 32. I placed my 2 and I carry my 3. 4 times 3 is 12, and 12 plus 3 is 15. So 38 times 4 is 152. Now before I do anything else, I got to go to step 2. Step 2 says place a 0 in the product line in the ones place. So here's the product line. I place a 0 in the ones place. This is very important because step 3 tells me to multiply the top number, which is 38, by the digit in the tens column on the bottom number, and that is a 2. But when I multiply 38 times 2, I'm really doing 38 times 20 because this 2 is in the tens place. So by placing a 0 here, I'm getting the product of 38 times 20, even though I'm saying 38 times 2. So here we go with step 3. I'm going to multiply the top number 38 by the digit in the tens place 2. 2 times 8 is 16. I place my 6 and carry my 1. 2 times 3 is 6 and 1 is 7. So 38 times 20 is 760. Step 4 tells me to find the sum of the two products. So one product is 152, the other product is 760. So 152 plus 760. 2 plus 0 is 2. 5 plus 6 is 11. Carry my 1. 1 plus 1 is 2, and 2 plus 7 is 9. So 38 times 24 is 912, which is close to my estimate of 800. In our second example, we're going to multiply a two-digit number by a three-digit number. Notice that the steps are the same. We're not going to do this any differently. There's just an extra number to multiply in the hundreds column. Before I get started, I want to estimate my answer. 212 is close to 200. And 31 is close to 30. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to multiply 200 times 30. 2 times 3 is 6, and then there's 3 zeros. So my estimate is 6,000. Now, I rounded both of those numbers down, so I know my answer is going to be higher than 6,000, but it should be close to 6,000. So here we go. Step 1, find the product of the top number, which is 212, and the digit in the ones place in the bottom number, which is 1. So I'm going to multiply 212 times 1, which is 212. Step 2. Before multiplying the tens place a 0 in the ones place on the product line. So here's the product line. I'm going to place a 0 in the ones place. That's very important because in step 3, I'm going to find the product of the top number, 212, and the digit in the tens place, which is 3. However, that 3 really has a value of 30. So what I want to know is 212 times 30. And this 0 here is what will let me say 212 times 3, but really get the value of 212 times 30. So here we go. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 1 is 3. And 3 times 2 is 6. So 212 times 30 is equal to 6,360. Step 4, sum the two products. 2 plus 0 is 2. 1 plus 6 is 7. 2 plus 3 is 5. And 0 plus 6 is 6. So 212 times 31 is 6,572, which is close to my estimate of 6,000. In 5th grade, we don't have to multiply 3-digit numbers, but several of you are high flyers and you're ready for this, so I'm going to show you how to do it. So first thing I want to do is estimate. 312 is close to 300, and 188 is close to 200. So 300 times 200, 3 times 2 is 6. I've got 4 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. So my estimate is 60,000. So let's go ahead and give it a try. I start with step 1, find the product of the top number, 312, and the digit in the ones place in the bottom number, which is 8. So 2 times 8 is 16, carry my 1. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 1 is 9, and then 8 times 3 is 24. So 312 times 8 is 2,496. Number 2 says, before multiplying the tens place a 0 in the ones place on the product line. So here's my product line. This is the ones place. I place a 0 there. It's really important because in step 3, it says find the product of the top number, 312, and the digit in the tens place, which is 8. But we're really not looking for 312 times 8. We're looking for 312 times 80 because 8 is in the tens column. By placing my 0 in the ones place, I'll get the product of 312 times 80 while I'm only multiplying 312 times 8. So here we go. Step 3. Find the product of the top number and the digit in the tens place in the bottom number. So 312 times 8. 8 times 2 is 16. I place my 6 and carry my 1. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 1 is 9. 8 times 3 is 24. So 312 times 80 is 24,960. Step 4 tells me place a 0 in both the ones place and the tens place on the product line. So here's my product line. I'm putting a 0 in the ones and a 0 in the tens. This is really important because in step 5, it says find the product of the top number and the digit in the hundreds place in the bottom number. So I'll be doing the top number, 312, times the bottom number, 1. But that number's not really 1 because it's in the hundreds column. It's really 100. And these two zeros here will give me the product of 312 times 100, even though I'm just thinking about 312 times 1. So 312 times 1 is 312. So 312 times 100 is 31,200. My last step, step 6, says find the sum of the products. So now I'm going to add 6 plus 0 is 6. 9 plus 6 plus 0 is 15. Carry my 1. 4 plus 1 is 5. 5 plus 9 is 14. And 14 plus 2 is 16. Carry my 1. 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 plus 4 is 7, and 7 plus 1 is 8. Nothing to carry. 2 plus 3 is 5. So I place my comma, and 312 times 188 is 58,656, which is close to my estimate of 60,000. Finn runs 50 minutes every morning. How much time does he spend running in 2 weeks? I wrote an equation in order to solve this problem. So I know they run 50 minutes every day for 2 weeks. So first I find out how long in 1 week. So 50 minutes times 7 days, and then I'm going to multiply it by 2 because there are 2 weeks. So 50 times 7 is 350 minutes per week. And then 350 minutes per week times 2 weeks is 700 minutes. So Finn runs 700 minutes in 2 weeks. Domestic cats can run up to 44 feet per second on land. At this rate, how many feet could a cat run in 12 seconds? Find 44 times 12. First estimate, then do the problem. Start by multiplying the ones, then multiply the tens. Don't forget that by estimating first, you can determine if your answer is reasonable. In step 1, I'm going to multiply the ones. 2 is in the ones column. So I'm going to multiply 2 times 4, which is 8. I record that under the 2 in the ones column. Then I'll multiply the 2 times the 4 in the tens column. 2 times 4 is 8, so I record 8 in the tens column. Now before I multiply my tens, I place a 0 underneath of the 8 in the ones column. That's because I'm about to multiply 10, but I'm going to call it 1 when I actually multiply. So when I say 1 times 4, I'm really doing 10 times 4. That 0 makes it 40, which is what I want it to be. So 1 times 4 is 4. I place the 4 in the tens column under the 8, and then I multiply 1 times the 4 in the tens column, and that 4 is also 4. I place that in the hundreds column. Now, I'll move on to the next slide. Step 3 is to add the two products that you got when you multiplied the ones column and the tens column. In step 3, I add starting in the ones column. 8 plus 0 is 8. I move over to the tens column. 8 plus 4 is 12. I record my 2 in the tens column, and I carry my 1 to the hundreds column. Now I add 1 plus 4, and I get 5. Therefore, a domestic cat can run 528 feet in 12 seconds. When I think about my estimate, which was 440, 528 and 440 are reasonably close. Try example 2, 165 times 31, and check your work on the next slide. Don't forget to estimate first so you know if your answer is reasonable. Okay, first I'm going to estimate. 165 is close to 200 and 31 is close to 30. So 200 times 30 is 6,000. I know that because the basic fact is 2 times 3, which equals 6. I then follow my pattern until I get to 200 times 30, and I get 6,000. Now I'm going to multiply the ones. 1 is in the ones column, so I say 1 times 5 is 5. Now I multiply the 1 times the 6 in the tens column. 1 times 6 is 6. Finally, I multiply the 1 times the 1 in the hundreds column. 1 times 1 is 1. So my first line has 165. Now before I multiply the tens column, which has a 3 in it, I'm going to place a 0 in the ones column. That's because that 3 really is equal to 30. But when we're doing our multiplication, we're not going to say 30, we're going to say 3. So my 0 is in the ones column. 3 times 5 is 15. I record 5 in the tens column, and I carry my 1 to the above the 6 in the tens column. Now I say 3 times 6 is 18, and I add the 1 that's above the 6, and I get 19. So in the hundreds column, I write down 9, and I carry my 1. Now I multiply 3 times 1, and I get 3. I add the 1 on top, and I have 4. So my second product is 4,950. Step 3 is to add the partial products that you have. Now I add 165 plus 4,950. I start in the ones column. 5 plus 0 is 5. I record that in the ones column. I move to the tens column. 6 plus 5 is 11. I put down my 1 in the tens column, and I carry 1 to the hundreds column. 1 plus 1 is 2, and 2 plus 9 is 11. I put 1 in the hundreds column and carry 1 to the thousands column. 1 plus 4 is 5. So I get 5,115. 165 times 31 is 5,115. I compare that to my estimate of 6,000, and it is reasonable. Give this one a try. Look back at the examples if you need help. Step 1, I multiply the 3 in the ones column by 32. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. So my first line has a 96 on it. Now I'm going to multiply the 1 in the tens column times 32. I place a 0 in the ones column before I start. 1 times 2 is 2. I record the 2. 1 times 3 is 3. I record the 3. Step 3, I find the sum of those two products. Starting in the ones column, 6 plus 0 is 6. In the tens column, 9 plus 2 is 11. I put down my 1 and I carry my 1. 1 plus 3 is 4. 416. So 32 times 13 is 416. My estimate of 300 is reasonable, so I know I'm correct. Describe how addition is used when you multiply by two-digit numbers. Multiplying by two-digit numbers is the same as multiplying by one-digit numbers in this way. So if you're having trouble with this question, just think about how is addition related to multiplication? We use addition when we multiply two-digit numbers because one factor you add repeatedly and the other factor tells you how many times to add that factor. Estimate, then multiply. Use your estimate to check your answers. If you're having trouble, look back at your examples or at the video I provided. In number 1, I'm multiplying 102 times 12. I estimate 100 times 12, which is 1,200. I start in my ones column, which has a 2 in it, and I'm going to multiply 2 times 102. So 2 times 2 is 4. I move to the next column. 2 times 0 is 0. And then finally, I'm going to multiply that 2 by the hundreds column. 2 times 1 is 2. So my first line has 204 on it. Now I'm going to multiply the 1 in the tens column, but before I do that, I have to place a 0 in the ones column, because that's not really a 1 that I'm going to be multiplying, it's really 10 I'm going to be multiplying. So I start with the 1 and I say 1 times 2 is 2, and I record the 2. Then I move to the next digit, 0. 1 times 0 is 0. I record the 0. Finally, I move to the third digit. 1 times 1 is 1. Now I've got 204 plus 1024. Sorry, 1020. When I add, I'll get 4 in the ones column, 2 in the tens column, 2 in the hundreds column, and 1 in the thousands column. So 102 times 12 is 1224, which is close to 1200. For number 3, I'm going to multiply 102 times 56. So first I'm going to estimate 100 times 56, which is 5,600. Now I'm going to start in the ones column by multiplying 102 times 6. 6 times 2 is 12. I put down my 2 and carry my 1. 6 times 0 is 0. I add the 1 and I record the 1 in the tens column. Then I'm going to multiply 6 times 1, and 6 times 1 is 6. I'm now done multiplying 102 times 6. Now I have to multiply 102 times 5. But before that, I put a 0 in the ones column, because that is not 5, that is 50. Now I say 5 times 2 is 10. I record my 0 and carry my 1. 5 times 0 is 0, plus 1 is 1, so I record the 1 in the next column. Finally, I multiply 5 times 1, and I get 5, which goes in the thousands column. Now I'm going to add 612 plus 5,100, and I get 5,712, which is close to 5,600. In number 4, I'm multiplying 24 times 21. 24 is close to 25, and I know 25 times 2 is 50. So I'm going to estimate 25 times 20 to be 500. My answer should be close to 500. I start in the ones column. I'm going to multiply 24 times 1. And 24 times 1 is going to give me 24. Before I multiply 24 times 2, 2 is the digit in my tens column, I have to put a 0 in the ones column, because that is not a 2 I'm multiplying, that's really 20 that I'm multiplying. So now that I have that 0, I go ahead and I say 2 times 4 is 8, and then 2 times 2 is 4. So now my problem is 24 plus 480, and that equals 504. 504 is close to my estimate of 500, so I feel like I have it right. Try these problems. Don't forget to estimate first so that you can check your answer for reasonableness. Number 5, I'm going to multiply 39 times 34. 39 is close to 40, and 34 rounds to 30. So I'm going to estimate 40 times 30, which is 1,200. My answer should be somewhere around 1,200. So first I'm going to multiply my ones column, which has a 4 in it. So I'm thinking 39 times 4. 4 times 9 is 36. I place my 6 and carry my 3. 4 times 3 is 12, and 12 plus 3 is 15. So I place the 15 on the first line, and I have 156. Now I'm going to multiply 39 times the 3 in the tens column. Before I do that, I have to place a 0 in the ones column, because that's not 3 I'm multiplying, that's 30 I'm multiplying. So 3 times 9 is 27. I place the 7, and I carry my 2. Then 3 times 3 is 9, and 9 plus 2 is 11. I record that in the next two columns. Now my problem is 156 plus 1,170. I add that up, and I get 1,326, which is close to 1,200. Number 6, I'm multiplying 13 times 54. 13 is close to 10, so I'm going to think about 54 times 10 as my estimate, which is 540. Now I'm going to multiply my ones column. 4 is in the ones column. I'm going to multiply that by 13. 4 times 3 is 12. I write my 2 and carry my 1. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5. So I have 52 on the first line. Next I have to multiply the 5 in the tens column. Well, that's really a 50. So before I multiply that 5, I have to put a 0 in the ones column under the 2. Now that I've done that, I multiply 5 times 3, I get 15. I record the 5 in the tens column and I carry my 1. 5 times 1 is 5 plus 1 is 6. So now I have 52 plus 650. When I find the sum, I get 702. 702 is close to 540, so I feel like I'm accurate. In number 7, I'm multiplying 51 times 82, so I estimate 80 times 50. 5 times 8 is 40, and I need 2 more zeros, so my estimate is 4,000. I start by multiplying the 2 in the ones column times 51. 2 times 1 is 2, and 2 times 5 is 10. So my first line has 102. Now before I multiply my 8, I have to place a 0 in the ones column. Because I'm not multiplying by 8, I'm really multiplying by 80. Now that I have the 0, I begin. 8 times 51. 8 times 1 is 8. 8 times 5 is 40. So I place that on the second line, 4,080. Now I'm going to add 4,080 plus 102. I get 4,182, which is close to 4,000. Try these problems, make sure you estimate. In number 8, I'm multiplying 21 times 42, and I can estimate that with 20 times 40, which is 800. So first I'm going to multiply my ones column, which has a 2 in it. So 21 times 2 is my first problem, and that's 42. Before I multiply the tens column, which has a 4 in it, I place a 0 in the ones column because that's not 4, that's 40. Now I'm going to multiply 21 times 4, and I get 84. When I find the sum, it's 882, which is close to my estimate of 800. In number 9, I'm multiplying 69 times 14. I can round 69 to 70 and 14 to 10, and my estimate is 700. So I start in the ones column. I'm going to multiply 69 times 4. 4 times 9 is 36. I carry my 3 after I place my 6 in the ones column. 6 times 4 is 24, plus 3 is 27. So my first line has 276. Now before I multiply the 1 in the tens column, I place a 0 in the ones column because that number's value is 10, not 1. Now that my 0 is in the ones column, I'm going to multiply 69 times 1, which is of course 69. So my second line is now 690. I add 276 plus 690 and I get 966, which is close enough to 700. In number 10, I'm multiplying 83 by 367. Now this is the first time I'm multiplying by 100, but it doesn't really matter because it's done the same way. First I estimate. 367 is close to 400 and 83 is close to 80. 4 times 8 is 32, so 400 times 80 is 32,000. So I start with my ones column. 3 times 7 is 21. Then I carry my 2. 3 times 6 is 18. 18 plus 2 is 20. I place my 0 down on the line, and I carry my 2. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 plus 2 is 11. So my first line has 1,101. Now before I multiply the 8 in the tens column, I place a 0 in the ones column because that number is not 8, it is 80. Now that I have the 0, I can multiply the 8 times 367. 8 times 7 is 56, my favorite fact. I place the 6 down in the tens column and I carry the 5. 8 times 6 is 48. 48 plus 5 is 53. I place my 3 and I carry my 5. 3 times 8 is 24, and 24 plus 5 is 29. So I have 29,360 on my second line. Now I find their sum, and I get 30,461, which is close to my estimate of 32,000. In these problems, you're multiplying 3-digit numbers times 2-digit numbers. You got this, but don't forget to estimate. My first problem is 534 times 67. First, I'm going to estimate. 534 is close to 500, and 67 is close to 70. So 500 times 70 is 35,000. Now I'm going to multiply. I'm going to start my ones column with the 7. I'm going to multiply 534 times 7. 7 times 4 is 28. I place my 8 and carry my 2. 7 times 3 is 21. 21 plus 2 is 23. I place my 3 and carry my 2. 7 times 5 is 35. 35 plus 2 is 37. So my first line, the product of 534 times 7, is 3,738. Now I'm going to multiply 534 times 6. But before I do that, I have to place a 0 in the ones column because that 6 has a value of 60, not a value of 6. Now that I've got that 0 there, I can multiply by 6. 6 times 4 is 24. I place my 4 and carry my 2. 6 times 3 is 18, and 18 plus 2 is 20. I place my 0 on the line, and I carry my 2. 6 times 5 is 30. 30 plus 2 is 32. So I place 32 on the line. Now I add 3,738 plus 32,040, and I get 35,778, which is close to 35,000. Number 12 is 141 times 25. I estimated by doing 140 times 20. Now normally I would round 25 up to 30, but it is in the middle, and I know 14 times 2 in my head better than I know 14 times 3. So I did that, and I got 2,800. I know my answer will be close to 2,800, but it will be higher because I rounded 141 down, and I also rounded 25 down. So now I'm ready to do my multiplication, and my first step is to multiply the 5 and the 1s times 141. 5 times 1 is 5, 5 times 4 is 20, and 5 times 1 is 5, plus the 2 is 7. So 141 times 5 is 705. Now before I multiply the 2 in the tens column, I have to place a 0 in the ones column, because that 2 has a value of 20. Now that I have the 0 in the ones column, I can multiply 141 times 2, and I'm going to get 282. With a 0 in the ones column, that's 2,820. I add 705 plus 2,820, and I get 3,525. That is reasonably close to 2,800. Number 13, I'm going to multiply 229 times 31. 229 rounds down to 200, and 31 rounds down to 30. So my estimate is 6,000. Now because both numbers rounded down, I expect my answer to be greater than 6,000, but not too far. Now I multiply the ones column, which has a 1 in it. 229 times 1 is 229, so that goes on my first line. Now I need to multiply the 3 in the tens column by 229. Before I do that, I place a 0 in the ones column, because the value of that 3 is 30. Now that I have the 0, I go ahead and I multiply. 3 times 9 is 27. Place the 7 and carry my 2. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 plus 2 is 8. I place the 8. 3 times 2 is 6. I place the 6. So I have 6,870 on my second line. I add 229 plus 6,870, and I get 7,099, which is close to 6,000. Marshall's mother buys 2 boxes of granola bars each week. Each box contains 8 granola bars. If she continues buying 2 boxes each week, how many granola bars will she buy in a year? 1 year is 52 weeks. This problem took a couple of steps. First, I had to figure out how many bars there were per week. Once I knew how many bars there were per week, I was able to find it yearly. So for the week, I'm buying 2 boxes with 8 bars in it. So 8 times 2 is 16. That means that each week there are 16 bars. Now, there are 52 weeks in a year, so I need to multiply 16 times 52 in order to find out how many granola bars for the year. So I start in the ones column. I'm going to multiply 16 times 2, and that's 32. I place my 0 below the 2 in the ones column before I multiply 16 times 5. 16 times 5, 5 times 6 is 30. I put my 0 and carry my 3. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 3 is 8. So 16 times 50 is going to give me 800. Now I multiply now I add 32 plus 800 and I get 832 bars per year. So there are 832 granola bars that she buys each year. A delivery truck travels 278 miles each day. How far does it travel in 25 days? This is a multiplication problem because they're giving me how far it is in one day and asking me for the total number of miles over 25 days. So I'm going to take my 1 day total of 278 and multiply it by 25 days. I start in the ones column, multiply 278 times 5, and I get 1,390. I then place my 0 in the ones column and multiply 278 times 2, which is 556, but with the 0 in the ones column, it becomes 5,560. I then find the sum of 1,390 and 5,560, and that is 6,950 miles. Therefore, the truck travels 6,950 miles. A farmer buys 1,000 pounds of hay, which he thinks will last 31 days. If his cow eats about 25 pounds of hay per day, for how many days more than 31 will the farmer hay feed the cow? Explain. Okay, so this is a multi-step problem. The first thing I need to do is figure out how much food that animal will eat in 31 days. There are 31 days in the month and 25 pounds per day. That means that there will be 775 pounds that will have been eaten. That's less than the 1,000 pounds that he bought. So now I need to know how much is left. Well, if he had 1,000 pounds of hay and the cow ate 775 pounds of hay, then he has 225 pounds left. So then I just made a table and I followed a pattern. If each day they eat 25 pounds of hay, they'll eat 25 on the first day. After the first day, on the second day, they'll have eaten 50, and then 75, and then 100, and then 125, and then 150. I'm just using repeated addition of 25 until I match that number of 225, which will happen on day 9. Therefore, there will be 9 days past the 31-day mark where they'll have food for the cow. Find 225 times 124. Use the same strategy that you used for multiplying by a 2-digit number, except include multiplying by the hundreds place. Show your work. Okay, if you got this one right, great job. If you didn't, follow the steps and see where you made your mistake. So same as multiplying a 2-digit by 2-digit, I'm going to start in the ones column. There's a 4 in the ones column, so I multiply 235 times 4, and I get 940. Next, I multiply the tens column, which has a 2 in it. Before I multiply that 235 times 2, I've got to place a 0 in the ones column, because that 2 is really equal to 20. So I'm really multiplying 235 times 20, even though I'm saying 235 times 2. I start by multiplying 2 times 5, which is 10. I place my 0 and carry my 1. 2 times 3 is 6. I add my 1 and I place my 7. 2 times 2 is 4. So 235 times 20 is 4,700. Now here's the new part. I'm going to multiply the 1 in the hundreds column by 235. This time I'm still going to say 1, but it's really 100. So everyone here should know that that means 2 zeros. Hundreds are 2 zeros. So I place a 0 in the ones and a 0 in the tens, and then I can multiply the 1 in the hundreds. 235 times 1 is 235. So that means that 235 times 100 is 23,500. Now I add 940, 4,700, and 23,500, and I get 29,140. That is close to my estimate of 30,000. How do you multiply by two-digit numbers? First you multiply the ones, then you multiply the tens, then you add to find the product.